we finished one broadcast, and he went up to his office, and then somebody came and said, "Doctor would like to visit with you in his office." So we went up to his office, and it's just very quiet, just the two of us, just like you were describing. And we chatted for a while. It was really wonderful. I just asked several questions that I'd always wanted to ask him. And I'll tell you one of those questions in just a minute. But he was at his desk with a stack of letters that people had handwritten to him. And he was writing handwritten notes back to them.
Yes.
That you're never so big, you're never so famous. You treat every single person who writes to you as a person, every person you talk to as a person.
Well, welcome to the Truth Changes Everything podcast. Dr. Jeff, it's great to sit down with you. My name is Aaron Atwood. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a vice president here at Summit, and we have a special episode that you and I wanted to do together because yesterday we learned that Dr. James Dobson passed away and went to be with the Lord. Dr. Dobson has a very special place in the history of Summit and our personal stories as well. And we thought we could have, I think, a tribute that we will try to do justice to his legacy here at Summit, but also in the broader picture of what he's meant to the ministry here and to our lives personally. And so, Jeff, it's a pleasure to sit down with you and just reminisce and reflect on the life of someone like Dr. James Dobson.
An incredible man with an incredible legacy. And a lot of things are being said in the media, negative things, positive things about Dr. Dobson's legacy. But, he's a guy we knew personally, a guy who really helped to mentor us in key times of our lives. And I think the things we'll share will maybe put a little bit of light on who he was as a man that will be very encouraging to people who have the opportunity to listen to this conversation today.
So, Dr. Jeff, as you think back on the life and legacy of Dr. James Dobson, what kind of personal influence did he have on you as a leader in the broad perspective, in the big picture?
The first time I ever heard of Dr. James Dobson was when my dad wanted to tell me about the facts of life and couldn't bring himself to do it. And so we put in an audio cassette as we were driving someplace about Dr. Dobson discussing puberty. That's what I remember, though. That's how he pronounced the word. And that was sort of, what does it mean that your body is changing and you're becoming a man? And it's the first time I'd ever heard of him. But then many years later, I had the opportunity to come and help out at Summit Ministries in the summertime. This program had a huge impact on my life. And one of the students who came through the program was Ryan Dobson.
Right.
Well, Ryan's life was completely changed by his time at Summit Ministries, so much so that he went back home to California, where they were living at the time, and brought back a bunch of his friends to Summit Ministries that same summer. And Dr. James Dobson at that time had the Focus on the Family radio broadcast. Millions of people were listening to this program. And he chose to feature Summit Ministries. So Dr. David Noble, Clark Bowers, Christine Magruder went on two students of Summit Ministries, all went on the program together. And they were very articulate and over the course of 2 episodes brought attention to Summit Ministries in a way that it was far beyond anything that had happened at Summit Ministries before. And at that time, I was a student at Baylor, so I was focused in on trying to write my thesis. And Doc Noble called me and said, "Tiger, I need you to come out and help this summer." And I asked him why. He said, "Well, we were just on Focus on the Family." And I knew that the previous summer we had about 250 students in the program. And I asked him, "Well, what's changing?" He said, "Well, we have now 14,000 requests for applications for students to attend Summit Ministries." And I said, "Well, that's great, Doc. I'm so happy for you, but I'm finishing my thesis." And he said, "Well, where are you in the thesis process?" I said, "No, I've written my first 2 chapters." He said, "Great, you only have 3 more to go. I'll see you in 3 weeks." And I was literally, okay. So I wrote the balance of my thesis in 3 weeks and came out to Colorado to help with this influx of students, moving from 250 immediately to 1,000 students. And then over the course of years, even more students in the program. And I think a lot of parents have gotten the impression through that broadcast that Summit is a place that you send your bad kid to get fixed.
I've heard stories.
Yeah. So it wasn't just 1,000 students instead of 250. It was 1,000 students who had a lot of things going on, a lot of difficult issues. You want to talk about being thrown into the deep end as a young man trying to help in those situations. But Aaron, it immediately struck me, and this is where Dr. Dobson's influence is both powerful on this ministry, but very personal. These students were really struggling. I mean, with all kinds of things, with addictions, with juvenile delinquency, all kinds of things that they were working through. And I realized there isn't a kid who is beyond hope. It was so shocking for me as a kid who had tried to be a good kid growing up to be in this situation, but to realize, no, that's not how God sees this. Every single one of these kids bears his image. And whatever they come with, however much baggage, however difficult it is, however unfamiliar it is, to me, they're here on purpose, and God is going to work in their lives. And we have seen tens of thousands of miracles since that time in young hearts and minds.
It was a real turning point for us as an organization. I remember talking to Betty, who worked actually downstairs in this building, where our administrative office was, on the day that radio show went live. And no one knew around here what the effects of that might be. And she was the only one in the office that day answering the telephones. And she said, I came in the office. She's from Louisiana. I came in the office and the phone just started ringing, and it didn't stop all day. And I put a tape in the voice recorder,
Yeah, you remember those? Yeah.
The answering machine.
Put a 90-minute little cassette in there.
Yeah, she said, I went and took my lunch break and came back, and that tape was full. And the phone just kept ringing. I just wrote names down on sticky notes. And by the end of the day, the whole room was just plastered, wallpapered with yellow sticky notes of parents' name and information. And how do I get my kid to Summit? How do I get my kid to Summit? That was big for us, really, really big. And the phone really hasn't stopped ringing ever since, has it?
Yeah. Well, I do remember the day that Dr. Dobson came to visit Summit after all of that happened and the program had started to grow. And my parents were among those who came out to help. And so my mom was in the kitchen. Actually, Ryan was working on the staff that summer in the kitchen as well. And Dr. Dobson walked into the room. And if you did never have the opportunity to meet Dr. Dobson personally, how do you describe it? When he walks into a room, he owns the room. Like, he's a tall, big, athletic, gregarious, fun-loving man. He walked into the kitchen, and here's Ryan, his son, who was mostly, every time people would meet Ryan, I felt bad for him in a way, because they'd meet Ryan, they'd say, I love your dad so much. Like, felt like they were using Ryan to kind of get to his dad.
Right.
And Dr. Dobson walks into the Summit kitchen, and my mom had the presence of mind to say, oh, you must be Ryan's dad.
That's great.
You're a big deal.
That is great.
But Ryan's our guy.
Yes.
We love Ryan.
Well, and that's a big part of this story too. Ryan's experience at Summit, it wasn't just he came for a summer and left and then, okay, I'll come back again with some friends. He came back summer after summer and taught here on staff and faculty, and the students loving him. And, that was a really big deal for us too, because Ryan's influence on his dad really put us in his dad's heart.
That's right. Yeah. In his heart. And I remember the first time that I had an extended conversation with Dr. Dobson. It was through Ryan. He said, he was staying with us here at Summit, and he said, why don't y'all come over and hang out at my parents' house? So he gave us the address, and it was my brother Scott Myers and Jeff Baldwin and I got in a Jeep and just drove over. And we're nervous because Dr. Dobson, is a legend. And we came up to their house. It was a little surprising because, Dr. Dobson sold millions of books. He could have lived anywhere he wanted. He lived in a modest townhouse, drove a very sensible car, just a regular guy. Mm-hmm. And we came up, knocked on the front door, our hearts pounding.
Right.
The door flings open and Dr. Dobson is standing there. And of course, he's taller than any of us by several inches and big guy. And he said, "Can I help you?" And we said, "Yeah, Ryan asked us to come over and hang out." And he said, "Ryan's not here. Can I help you?" I was like, "We thought maybe Ryan was," and he said, "I'm just kidding you. Come on in." So we came in the house, and Shirley was a wonderful hostess. I mean, there was plenty of Pepsi and Doritos at that house.
She knew the way to
She
your
knew
hearts.
the way to young guys' hearts, and we came in and we played ping pong, which didn't go very well for me.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, Dr. Dobson is a fierce competitor. I pretty much got crushed playing ping pong, but we had great conversations, and the conversations weren't what you might expect. You think, okay, well, this is the best-selling author and child psychologist, Dr. James Dobson. You're going to be talking about your childhood traumas and things like that. I remember the first real conversation I had for an extended period of time with him was he said, "What do you do for exercise?" I said, "I occasionally ride my mountain bike and hike." And he said, "Oh, you need regular exercise. You get one body, and you got to take good care of it." Mm. He had a little room there where he had his treadmill that he got on every day, and he told about a heart attack that he had recently had, and how he had really wanted to start exercising more. But actually, it was so strange how little conversations like that really shaped me. It really was after that I got much more serious about mountain biking and cycling and then ultimately running so that I would have a regular form of exercise. And even that was Dr. Dobson's influence on my life.
Sure. Yeah. I worked at Focus on the Family for a short stint as a writer there. And I remember I had an article that sort of blew up. It was with a national television channel, and we were kind of poking at them a bit. And they got very upset because our article encouraged the readers to email the president of that television station and tell them to reverse their decision about a particular thing they were doing. And so one of the vice presidents at that company was calling Dr. Dobson, telling them they needed to take that article down because this wasn't the whole story. And I got called into Dr. Dobson's office. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is it. I'm done. What have I done? But I remember, my supervisor and I go into the office, and it's, in this executive wing of Focus on the Family. And I sat down, and Dr. Dobson just said, "Well, Aaron, tell me a little about yourself." And all of a sudden it was just him making me feel comfortable because he knew, okay, this young man does not typically go into the executive wing of a large organization like this. And he just understood the situation, and he made me feel so comfortable. And then we just talked through, well, tell me about the story you wrote, and, what about this? And he asked some, just pointed questions that, thank the Lord, I was able to answer. But he was like that. He understood his presence in the context of the situation and wasn't there to push things around or make you feel like you were in trouble.
I never noticed a difference between his public and his private presence. He's just exactly the way you described. Of course, he lived here near where we are.
Yes.
And so I saw him in the grocery store once, and my son Stuart was there, and Stuart had no context for understanding who Dr. James Dobson was.
No.
Different generation. And all I could think, and he's always very kind, always remembers your name. That's the amazing thing. The millions of people he must have met. I don't know how that was possible. He said, "Jeff, how are you?" And I said, "Great, I want you to meet my son, Stuart." And I said, "Stuart, how do you introduce Stuart to this man?" And I said, "Stuart, this is the man who invented Adventures in Odyssey." And
yes.
Dr. Dobson laughed, and Stuart's eyes went wide. Like, this is the man who invented Adventures in Odyssey.
Oh, that's great.
But each generation of students, and Dr. spoke here with the Summit Ministries students. They, in fact, recorded a video course called Life on the Edge. Those were Summit Ministries students from back in the day. So this is the 1990s. And,
That's great.
but he spoke at different events that we did here. And there was one where we were seated at the table and it's a dinner and, lots and lots of people there. And my wife, Stephanie, met Dr. Dobson for the first time. And she was trying to describe to him the impact that he had had on her life. So when she was a teenager, her mom was divorced. She was running around wild, doing drugs. Stephanie, not mom.
No.
And she would, Carol would listen to the Focus on the Family broadcast. It just brought 30 minutes of hope into her day. Mm-hmm. And Stephanie said, I remember telling her, turn that off. That's terrible, and all of that. But then here we are, 40 years later, sitting at a table, and Dr. James Dobson is there, and Stephanie is trying to tell him the impact that he had had on her family. And his question was, hey, tell me your story. I want to hear your story.
Right. Exactly.
And all these people in the room, a lot of famous people, very successful people. And Dr. Dobson's just locked in on Stephanie asking her story. Yeah. It was just the way he was personally. The same guy who could meet with the president in the morning and be so focused on you asking your story in the afternoon that it was absolutely not incongruent. It was just perfectly the way he was.
Right. How do you think that's influenced you, seeing him from a distance and having experiences with him in the way that you lead this organization?
There are a lot of profound ways, but I think some of the ways are just very simple. When I'm with a student, I am with them. I focus in on them. In fact, you know this, because sometimes I'll need to be taken to another meeting or an interview or something like that. I will never leave a kid. Mm-hmm. I will never leave a kid. I will always be focused on them. If there's something else I need to do, you're going to have to come and get me.
Right.
Because I'm not going to leave that kid. I really learned that. Also, just the value of just even personal correspondence. I had the privilege of being on the Focus on the Family broadcast, but not with James Dobson. But Family Talk, being on that program many, many times. Mm-hmm. And so in the studio with him, with other people as well. There are a lot of interviewers they had, but with him. And we finished one broadcast, and he went up to his office, and then somebody came and said, Doctor would like to visit with you in his office. So we went up to his office, and it's just very quiet, just the two of us, just like you were describing. And we chatted for a while. It was really wonderful. I just asked several questions that I'd always wanted to ask him. And I'll tell you one of those questions in just a minute. But he was at his desk with a stack of letters that people had handwritten to him. Mm-hmm. And he was writing handwritten notes back to them.
Yes.
That you're never so big, you're never so famous. You treat every single person who writes to you as a person, every person you talk to as a person. But in that conversation, I said, this is such a dumb question, but I just had to know. I said, Doc, do you ever think about, hanging it up? Or, because the impact you've had is huge, and man, you should go fishing or whatever. And he said, when I was 35, God put a mantle of leadership around me. Mm. And until he removes that, then I feel a sense of obligation to continue to try to make as big of a difference as I can. Mm-hmm. And that shaped the way we operate at Summit, because you and I've talked about this and a lot of other people. Mm-hmm. We want to work together as if we're going to be working together for the rest of our lives, but with a sense of urgency that this might be the last day that we get to work together. Mm. And how those two things tie together, I think, was really part of the influence of Dr. Dobson.
Yeah. I remember early, maybe weeks into you coming on board. I had come maybe a couple of months before you got here full time. We both went over to the studios with our founder, David Noble, because Dr. Dobson wanted to have the two of you on the broadcast for a very specific reason. Talk about that broadcast specifically.
Well, transitioning leadership in an organization is very difficult. And he wanted us to have a great transition. So he wanted to honor Doc Noble, but he wanted to kind of introduce to his audience who the new guy is and do it in a way that really made people feel confident that this ministry's foundation is solid and it's going to continue. And in fact, after that meeting, he said, I'm going to write a little quote for you that you can share with your donors and your supporters. And it said something like, Dr. Jeff Myers is a very gifted and inspirational young leader, something like that.
You were young then.
People still use that quote, but the word young has somehow gotten dropped out of that quote.
Sorry.
But that was, think of how kind that is. And he was a part of a generation that did. Tim LaHaye. Remember Tim LaHaye? He did something very similar, gave a similar quotation. Josh McDowell. Others who were older, they understand that principle of passing the baton to the next generation, and they were so gracious in the way they did that. But that meeting with Dr. Dobson was really tremendous because it felt like a 2 Timothy 2:2 moment. These things you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, commit to faithful men who in turn will be equipped to teach others also.
Mm-hmm. He was very generous with his platform. Yeah, on behalf of us especially, but
and I would expand on that because how many thousands of episodes of radio did he do? So Dr. James Dobson was brilliant. His advice was personal, practical. Immediately you could see that it's applicable and that it's real. And yet, when he was on air, it was him asking questions of other people. He knew how to bring out the best. And I wish I could describe when you're in the studio with him what it's like. But he knew how to ask just the right question that would allow you to shine. And that's phenomenal for someone who had advised 5 presidents and had all of this influence. When he was in the studio, he was helping you be your very best.
Mm-hmm. And in his own right, obviously, he was an expert in these areas. He could have had a show where he just spoke.
Exactly. He could have said, come in and sit here while I teach you,
Yes.
About these things. And he would work. He had a way of working in key things and directing the conversation. But you always walked away feeling, I was my very best. I was at my very best in that broadcast.
Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about taking the mantle of leadership now. In some ways, I think Dr. Dobson was a bit ahead of his time. This is where he got some pushback, probably being labeled maybe too political or too much about particular issues that families may not have wanted to listen to, like pornography. He was adamant that pornography was an issue we needed to address. Raising girls, bringing up boys. Mm-hmm. He was very gender focused in those days, and in a sense, I feel that you've noticed that. What do you take away from some of the issues that were important to him as you think about the kinds of content and the kinds of things that we're teaching students and parents here at Summit?
Well, Aaron, so much of what we do at Summit Ministries is biblical apologetics. But apologetics means making a defense of the faith, not apologizing for the faith. I think Dr. Dobson came into a culture at a key time when Christians were embarrassed to be Christians. Christianity seemed to be on the decline. The brightest, most popular voices in our culture were either anti-Christian or dismissive of Christianity. And he said, you don't have anything to apologize for. You can stand for the truth. And he did it in a way that was both firm and gracious. It was undeniably persuasive, but at the same time, you felt like, oh, I can stand. I personally can stand for what is true. And if people sling arrows at me, it's okay because Dr. Dobson can take it, and I think I might be able to as well. I wish I could describe the kind of courage that he gave to a younger generation of leaders of which I was a part at that time, to not be running around apologizing for everything, but to actually take truth seriously.
And he wasn't afraid to get in the mix, so to speak. I mean, he would go on Fox News and tackle a topic that he thought was wrong. And so I do think that emboldened a generation of leaders to say, oh, I'll follow his example. And we can think of dozens that risk being labeled as firebrands or contentious.
Well, when you look at something like the New York Times, and they had an obituary of Dr. Dobson, but it was written long, long ago. And what they do at a place like that is they write obituaries of people who eventually are going to die and who are famous, so that they don't have to write it the day of. But it's called him a controversial political figure or something like that. And that's just not really a very good description of the Dr. Dobson that I knew. I would say he was integrated. He understood that it wasn't all about politics, but it wasn't not about politics. That you have a biblical worldview that has a political component as well as a psychological component, a sociological component, a legal component. And he was very forward thinking. And he was one of a handful of men who founded the Alliance Defending Freedom. And that organization has really helped free speech and freedom of religion rebound in this country after decades of decline. Well, that wasn't separate from anything else he was doing. He just saw, if a biblical worldview is true, there is a legal component to it as well as a personal, psychological component. And he saw that as all very integrated. And the total amount of time that he spent talking about politics was really proportional, just a small percentage of the time. It's the part of his programming that got the most negative feedback, so everybody thinks about that. But he was very focused on helping parents do a great job, feeling confident, helping them raise boys and girls, as you mentioned, helping them do the things that would keep their marriages strong or try to repair them. And that really was his heart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What do you hope families would take away from his passing, as a moment in our lives? We collectively sort of look at this moment and say, what?
Well, that's a super tough question. I go back to that thought that Dr. Dobson had shared about the mantle of leadership. Each one of us has been given a mantle. And we aren't responsible maybe for reaching millions and millions of people. We aren't responsible for writing books that sell millions and millions of copies. But we do have the opportunity to wake up every day and ask, what do I do today to bring blessing to those who are around me? What do I do today to help society be more flourishing? It isn't a matter of scale. It's a matter of principle. So at the level that we've each been given, I think we have that opportunity. And I think the other part of it is to put people first. I just have one more story I was going to share. I had the opportunity, a buddy of mine, Dan, and I were able to go on a hunting trip where Dr. Dobson was on the trip. And Doc loved hunting. Mm-hmm. He loved sports, loved the outdoors. So
there wasn't a bird or a fish that was safe if he was around. That's what I understand.
No, not a bird, not a fish. Not a deer. I mean, and he just loved outdoors. And so we went on this trip, and Dr. Dobson was on it. It was hosted by some mutual friends. So we're at this lodge, and there's just a few of us there. And Dr. Dobson obviously he's a presence in every room. And so a lot of, people are like, I want to talk to Dr. Dobson or whatever. I don't want to feel like, I don't want to be pressuring him too much, but I want to talk to him and all of that. And at one point, there was just the two of us for a few minutes, and I was in a really tough season of life. You walked with me through this, so it's a really, really tough season. I was spiraling. And he just sat at the table and talked with me personally, gave me some wise advice. And here's what didn't happen. He never felt sorry for me. Like, I never got the impression, oh, poor you, I have sympathy for you. He had this sense that of a belief. God has given you everything that you need to be the person he wants you to be. And so I'm just going to give you some advice. I'm just going to walk alongside of you, but you're going to be okay. You got this. I have wanted that to be my message to every single person I work with, is that you got this. You're going to be okay. God's given you everything that you need to be who he wants you to be. And I don't feel sorry for you, but I do enjoy the privilege of walking alongside of you. Well, that's something that he did in those quiet moments that didn't get on the news, that we can also do with our own family and our own friends.
Yeah, that's great. Jeff, thanks for taking some time to have this conversation. I think it's really meaningful. It's been a joy to just think about his life with you, and I hope our listeners and viewers will go take the mantle of leadership that they have and use it to help people.
Amen.
Jeff, our team here is compiling so much content that came from the Dobsons, Ryan and Dr. Dobson and others, that we wanted to put on a site to share with the world. So if you're listening or watching and want to go to summit.org/Dobson, you can see the things that we think are really special that he did for us. So.
Summit.org/Dobson.
That's
and
right.
some of this goes way back in history.
It does.
So you'll hear that original audio program that literally changed the course of Summit Ministries from 1989, 88?
Yeah, one of those.
A little while ago.
I think I was 7. No, wait. Yeah. So we'll have that original broadcast and several talks and videos that Dr. Dobson and Ryan have shared for us. So I think it's really special, and I think you'll enjoy it there. Summit.org/Dobson.